everyone, welcome to Cancer Healing Journey Talks. Myself Sonali Modi from Community Outreach Team of ZenOnco.io and Love Heals Cancer. Cancer Healing Journey Talks help cancer survivors and caregivers to share their story with vast number of caregivers and survivors who have traveled or been traveling to this journey. It can also motivate and inspire them for their faster recovery as well. So firstly, I would like to introduce you to today's speaker, Ms. Dr. Anitha Ranganathan. She is a cancer survivor. I'm happy that you're here with us today to share your story. So over to you, ma'am. Please start with the introduction.
Hi, Sonali. Thank you for having me over here on this platform to share my experience through cancer at a personal level. Because, being a doctor, obviously, there's a lot that I've seen as a professional. So yeah, just to introduce myself, as you very rightly said, I'm a cancer survivor as well. I was diagnosed and I underwent treatment in February 2020. And besides that, professionally, I am a retired ENT surgeon. I've had over 15 to 20 years of experience as an ENT surgeon. I started off my career in India in Manipal Hospital in Bangalore. And in 2001, I moved to Malaysia. And I was there as an ENT surgeon, along with being a lecturer, as well as I was involved in the research of sleep as well for about 15 years. And then currently, since 2016, I have moved to New Zealand. And currently, I'm an integrative sleep expert. And I help people to sleep better. And my real group of people that I really want to help is cancer, those whose lives have been affected by cancer. Either directly, who are walking the journey themselves, or caregivers, or pretty much anybody whose life has been affected by cancer. So that is pretty much in a short form of what I'm doing.
Yeah. So what cancer type it was and at what stage it got diagnosed?
So I had breast cancer. It was the one which is like hormonal positive. So it was like strongly responsive to the hormones, estrogen and progesterone. And I was diagnosed at what we call stage 1C, where there were no lymph nodes involved. So it was just restricted to within the breast itself, but there were multifocal lesions, meaning there were multiple primaries. And that's how I came in the category of T1C, but I didn't have any lymph nodes and no distant metastasis either. So yeah, stage 1.
Okay. So what were the symptoms and how it got diagnosed?
Yeah, so I was pretty much, I guess in a way, like what most people say, I guess I could consider myself lucky because I could actually feel the lump. And I've always kind of had very dense breasts, that I used to kind of keep regularly monitoring through a mammogram. But so when I had like a completely new lesion that just felt very different, and of course, being a surgeon, I obviously had huge benefits of knowing what it could be. So yeah, it was pretty much within a few days of my being able to feel the lump, I pretty much knew that there was something off and that it had to be addressed.
So what was your first reaction when you got to know that you're diagnosed with cancer and how your family took this news?
Well, obviously, we kind of assume that being doctors and having seen so many cancer cases, you kind of think that we are a little bit maybe immune to it or whatever. But the reality is that when we have to walk the journey ourselves, I think we become a bit human again, and we have to let go of the doctor title. And now we realize like we have to walk the journey like pretty much anybody else. So yes, of course, initially, to be really honest, even before I got the confirmation through my biopsy, I pretty much knew it. I've also always been a very kind of an intuitive person. And so when I got diagnosed, it kind of almost it didn't come as too much of a surprise, but, the same feelings of like, why me? What did I do wrong? I was leading a good, healthy lifestyle, and like, what happened? No family history, no nothing. And suddenly out of the blue. So yes, it did have its impact. In terms of family, obviously, my husband was very, very upset. He was remaining very, very positive between the biopsy and the diagnosis. And he said, nah, it must be all good. But I kind of knew in my heart of hearts what the report is going to come as. So I think it was more of a shock for him, and it took a little bit of time for him to accept it. In terms of my actual family, as in my parents, they're all in India. And because it is at a time where I knew I will not be able to visit them or anything, I chose to remain very private about the whole thing. So I basically just, very few people knew about it. My mom came to know about it much later, like almost a year later, when I think I had the strength that should she fall apart, then I should be able to hold space for her. So yeah, and she took it quite okay. She was quite okay because I'd already completed treatment, and she saw how I've recovered and how I'm doing. So I think that was quite a reassuring thing for her. So she was quite good. And it's pretty interesting how we underestimate how strong, our mothers can be.
Yeah.
Um, and, they've got so much of innate strength. So I was pleasantly surprised by the way she actually took the whole thing.
Mm. So what treatment you underwent?
I had to undergo a lumpectomy, or what we call a partial mastectomy. I needed it twice because the first time they were not able to get the clear margins. The lymph nodes were clear right from the start, so I didn't really require like a node dissection. After surgery, I had radiation, so I required about 15 or 20 fractions of radiation. And I didn't require chemotherapy. There was no benefit of having chemotherapy, so I didn't require chemotherapy. But besides that, they also put me on tamoxifen. So I am currently on tamoxifen for at least 5 years and maybe 10 years. Yeah.
And did you try any alternative treatment?
I don't call it alternative. I actually call it integrative, because I'm a type of a person who really believes in integrating all aspects of our healing. This is something that I've always been a very staunch believer in, and I obviously had to implement it when I myself had to, walk the journey myself. So besides everything else that was being done by the Western, by the medical professionals, whom I knew I was in like really good hands, I also knew that my recovery from the whole thing really depended on what I was doing for myself between doctor's appointments, between my surgeon, between my surgical, surgery dates and things like that. And so I don't really call it alternative. I kind of call it, again, integrative. I definitely became more conscious of what I was feeding myself with, whether it was my food, whether it was my thoughts. I got very aware and conscious of the importance of exercise and having some kind of a movement to help me going better and to recover better. I got careful and very mindful of my emotions and the stress involved as well. So yeah, it just kind of really, really brought me back to myself and what I knew would be really helpful for my recovery eventually. So if you're talking about really in terms of alternative, I don't know if this comes under the category of alternative, because I did listen to everything that my medical provider had suggested as well, in addition to what I was doing on my own as well.
Yes. So how did you manage your emotional well-being at that time?
So as far as the emotional well-being was concerned, I remember the first thing I did was, um, I've always been a very private person, and kind of being an introvert, I realized that if I was going to be telling a lot of people about it, it's going to drain a lot of energies from me. And instead of them trying to reassure me, it's going to end up that I'm going to start feeling not very, forget about being supported. I feel like I would start going down the drain, because typically when people hear the word cancer, it's almost like, oh, all right, so we don't know how long she's going to live. And so I made a very conscious choice of keeping very private, staying very private about it. I remember I have a small group of school friends, my primary school friends, that we have a group chat on. So I had mentioned it to them, and they were there throughout my journey. At any time when I had to reach out, then they were there for me. There was a short time when I felt like I needed some counseling sessions as well. But honestly, after my first session, when I felt that I was just not able to establish a rapport with her, and that I wasn't really going to be gaining anything significant from having those sessions with her, I made a conscious choice of not going down that road. So in terms of my emotions, I've always been a person who does quite a bit of meditation. From coming from the type of background that we have an innate strength and an innate belief and trust in divinity, whatever we would like to call it. And even though I may not have been a very typical person who would like, pray and do things like that every day, I always knew in my heart of hearts there has always been someone who's been watching out for me. So I think in that way, that really gave me a lot of strength, and it gave me a lot of support. It would be wrong of me to underestimate the value of my husband and what a valuable role he played in that. Besides being a religious person, um, I don't think it would have been possible without him. So I think it was like a real test to the strength of our bond and our relationship, and I think that really went a long way. Um, when you're going through cancer, you have all these highs and lows of emotions and everything,
Yeah.
and you usually tend to take it out at the first person who's the closest to you, and that in my case was my husband. So we've survived it, and it's just made us even more strong. Our bond even more stronger and even more beautiful, and I think that really made a lot of difference.
Yes. So, how was your experience with the doctors and other medical staff?
Again, as I've said, I think, up to a certain extent, I think having a basic medical background definitely gave me a little bit of a leverage over maybe someone who hasn't had a medical background. But having said that, when you are a patient, especially with something which is relatively unrelated to the field that I was dealing with, so had it been a ear, nose, throat type of a cancer, I may have been a bit more knowledgeable, but this is something relatively new. And honestly, I think all of us are at that stage where we want to be considered as patients, where we don't want to be considered as the doctors. So you actually want to be told what's best for you. So I did do a little bit of reading, but I was very, very, very conscious of what I was reading and what I wasn't going to be reading. Um, and up to a certain extent, as I mentioned, I've always been a person who's got a strong amount of faith and trust. And I knew that whatever was happening is going to be happening in the right way. I was privileged in the form in the sense that I got my complete treatment under private care in New Zealand over here. No doubt, I had to undergo treatment during the COVID time. So that definitely had its own share of scares of how it's going to be impacting. But overall, it was good. It was good. I had a good medical personnel. Every time I would have to go for my appointments, and even to date, that's what I still do. I always like to prepare myself from before to really decide and know what I'm going to be asking them, rather than going there and letting them do the talking and then us coming back and saying, oh gosh, I didn't ask this, I wanted to know about that. So I always went well prepared. And if necessary, there was a time when the fatigue was so bad that, I actually used to ask the doctor if I could actually record some of the conversations for me to listen to it later, in case if I couldn't remember, because the brain fog and the fatigue was really, really bad. So, I've done things like that as well. And I think that really went a long way. Being involved, being proactive, and having the trust and the faith, but really balancing it out, asking the right questions and getting the right information. It is your body, it is your choice. And no matter what is the diagnosis, nobody can decide the future for you. It's really in your hands as well at the end of the day.
Yes. So, what were the things that helped you and made you happy on this journey?
I think I mentioned quite a few already. Definitely support of my mainly my spouse initially, and then my friends as well. That really went a long way. Um, while you're going through treatment, you are like in a fight mode, right? Like you're normally in a fight or a flight mode. Right now, you can't flight because it's your body. You don't have anywhere to run away to. So when you're in fight mode, you don't have a choice, right? It's like radiation to radiation to radiation. What am I going to do in between? How much am I going to sleep? How do I exercise? What do I eat? So you're kind of almost in that mode where you're like, it's all reflex. You don't have a time to really focus on anything else that's going on. I think that part of joy, which is a beautiful question that you asked, is really hits in much later. I think I could really sense joy after my first year appointment, when I had, my 1 year later, I had my mammogram and I had my surgeon and I had my oncologist saying, well, you don't have any evidence of disease now. And I really honestly think that was the first time when I could actually take a normal breath, and where I actually felt like my entire year of everything that I had done is actually beginning to pay off, and whatever I'm doing it rightly. So that's when you can actually even begin to start dreaming of a life with joy or whatever. And I think the biggest lesson I think I learned was that we always plan for the future, that one day I'll be doing this, one day I'll be getting that, one day I'll be going here. And I think what cancer really made me do was like saying, all right, whether you have a year or whether you have 10 years, you better start doing what you want to do. So it was a roller coaster ride, but now I'm enjoying it. It's still a roller coaster, but it is enjoyable because I'm mindful of what I'm doing. I am finally beginning to do what I really want to do now that I've been given the second chance at life. And it's become a very beautiful journey.
Yeah. So, there are times when you feel that it's too much to handle, but you still don't give up. So, what was the one thing that motivated you and kept you going on such days?
Um, I think it really was, I've always been a survivor. To be honest, cancer may have been maybe the ultimate challenge that I've had, but I've had quite a few challenges in my life, even before this. And I think I've always come out of it making me feel like I'm just becoming a better person and I can handle this as well. So really, I think it's, as much as I would love to say it was the support of somebody else or something else, honestly, I think it was the strength that I actually possess within myself that I've always been quietly aware of and that I know is always been there. And I knew this wasn't the time that I brought it on and brought it out, then, when we say Shakti, right? So we all know that
Yeah.
we have our innate Shakti within ourselves. And if this wasn't a time I was going to bring it out, then it was never going to happen. So I really, really think that it is really that inner strength that each and every one of us possess, and that something like cancer and other challenges can actually bring out in us.
Hmm. So, did you made any lifestyle changes during or after the treatment?
Yes, I did. As I mentioned earlier, I was much more mindful of my food choices. For a really long time, I tried to, kind of I got more aware of my food sensitivities. So I modified my diet according to that. I did see nutritionists and things like that. But again, at the end of the day, I realized that I knew my body best, and it was really about listening to my body. Um, in terms of exercise, I think I was a little bit more lax previously. So yes, I have become more regular in terms of exercise. And again, I'm listening to myself. It's not about really overdoing it and causing more stress, but it's really about listening to what my body feels like on every day. Uh, and I'd like to talk about my work as well, because although I mentioned that I don't, I retired as an ENT surgeon 5 years ago, was working over here as well in different capacities. And I was able to take a really hard look at my work, and I reached a stage where I realized that if it was something that was really causing me a lot of stress, I could either address that, or if it is something that couldn't be addressed, then I realized that it is something that I would have to get out of. So whether it was in terms of work or whether it is in terms of toxic relationships, I became more careful and I became more hardcore about it. And I definitely think all of that is part of lifestyle modifications.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, do you think that cancer has changed you in a positive way?
Um, on most days, yes. On most days, yes. Like anybody else, we do have our days when we wonder, like, what is the lesson behind all of this, And sometimes it does come back and saying, hey, why me? What did I do wrong, kind of a thing. And no doubt it's been a great way to learn a lesson, but I don't think I would ever want anybody to have to learn their lesson in such a hard way. And that's just the way it is. That's just the reality. People typically say, oh, well, you were lucky because you were diagnosed early, or you were lucky because you're a medical person, or you were lucky because you managed to get treatment in private. Well, my friend, the only question I like to ask is like, well, if you think I'm lucky, then would you like to take my diagnosis? Right? So I don't believe, I think when you say that you were lucky, then I think that's a pretty insensitive way. And the other thing is, even when you finish treatment, people are like, all right, you finished treatment, so now you're back to normal. Honestly, I don't think any of us go back to normal. There's just no way we can go back to our life pre-cancer. So I think there have been a lot of hardcore lessons that I've had to learn. And yes, they've all turned out to be positive, most of them, but they're positive for me. I don't know if they're positive for everybody and overall or not.
Yes. So, what life lessons you got from your cancer journey?
Oh, so I actually wrote an article on Thrive Global, 20 lessons I learned from my diagnosis in 2020. And if there is a provision, actually, I'd be happy to share if you guys could actually share the link to that.
Yes.
And I think that was something which really addressed medical personnel, whatever. So really, I can't sum it up in very quickly, but I would love to share that article for you guys to read. And, I would love to hear your input on your the people who are watching this as well. So yeah, that would be pretty much that.
Yeah. So, how is your life after cancer?
How has my life been after cancer? As I mentioned earlier, I've become more mindful of what I feed myself with. And I'm not talking only food wise, I'm talking about in every wise, in thought wise, and everything. I think one big thing I really realized in cancer is that, when there's anything that starts causing me stress, whether it is trying out a new recipe at home or, you know, um, maybe a new project at work, or even an interview like this, I kind of always kind of reassure myself and say, hey, nothing is the end of the world. You've survived cancer. You can pretty much survive almost anything. And I think that has really been like a huge lesson for me. It's given me a lot of strength that I think I knew that each of us do possess. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's hidden very deep in, and it just makes life a bit more easier. We don't have to really sweat the small stuff, which I think very typically we usually tend to do. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So, have you ever asked yourself this question, like, why me? And if yes, then how you cope up with this thought?
Yes, definitely. As I mentioned earlier, there's no family history. I've always kind of led a relatively normal and a good, healthy lifestyle. But what I did realize was that most of us don't think of how we are feeding ourselves with our emotions, how we are feeding ourselves with our thoughts. And I think that can be a huge contributing factor to us developing these kind of illnesses. So when I think back retrospectively, I think that could most probably be one of the causes. And of course, me being a person with a scientific background, but I also believe a lot in the mind-body connection. So I did a fair bit of research on my own, and then I have realized that there are certain types of personalities which are more prone to illnesses like cancer. And that has actually been scientifically proven as well. So it kind of feels like it's pieces of puzzles that are coming together. And rather than me going down the self-piteous way, it's making a lot of sense now when I'm able to get answers to my questions, which is really reassuring, actually, which is really reassuring. So I'm not going to wallow in self-pity, but rather it's about saying, all right, it happened, and you know, it's just made me more aware of time.
Yes. So, what would be your message to cancer patients and survivors?
Um, I would definitely say that when we are going through our treatment, we give a lot of attention to ourselves, and then once we finish treatment, then we want to go back to being how we were pre-treatment. Now, I think the main thing about cancer is that we take good care of our bodies, we take good care of that organ that has been affected, but we don't take care and we don't give much importance to the emotions that happens around it. And at some point, it hits you hard, and that's when you are more prone to developing conditions like depression, PTSD, anxiety, and things like that. And so what I really believe is that each and every one of us need to take the time to heal. There is no point in trying to rush through the healing process. Sitting in the midst of uncomfortable emotions is very, very uncomfortable. It can be very, very confronting, but there is no running away from it. And the more we are able to adapt to it, and the more we have techniques of how to deal with it, whether it is meditation or yoga or prayers or playing with the dog or whatever, right? Whatever is your way of knowing how to cope with it is something that you need to do. If not, it's going to come and hit you and bite you back at some point in your life. So I think that is really something which is really, really important, that people need to know how to uh, manage the psychological component of it. I know there is a lot of stigma around the psychology, and I also understand that a lot of people have to get back to work. You know, they have their financial, constraints and things like that. But I think it's really, really important to realize that there was a reason why cancer happened in our body. And it's really about trying to quieten ourselves and trying to get that message and that learning from us, which very few of us are willing to do.
So how did you overcome your fear of treatment or side effects?
I won't say I really overcame it, to be honest, because I also had my fair amount of side effects like pretty much everybody else. But what I did, as I mentioned, was that I was very proactive about it. If something was developing, I would look it up, or I would approach my healthcare provider and ask them what can be done about it. Um, I was very aware that I never ever reached out to another survivor to get messages or to get ideas from them, because sometimes it can actually trigger in the wrong way. And something that's not happening to you may have happened to them, and then you expect it's going to happen to you as well. So I was very, very careful. I did use Google, but I knew how to Google it up. Again, that's all thankfully to my medical background. In addition to that, yes, as I mentioned, I was proactive with my healthcare providers. I did develop a huge amount of fatigue. In fact, I had to give up my job that I was working back then for, because I just couldn't cope in any way. There was no way I could cope. And, so it took some time. And I realized that, again, there was no way I could rush through that. It had to take time. The body was asking for rest. The body was asking for attention. My life was asking for attention. And this was the time for me to be kind to myself and compassionate to myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
So being a doctor, what message you want to give to people? Like, it is said that when they are suffering from a disease or depression or something like sort, their sleep generally gets affected. So what do you
Yeah.
think are the sleep disorders during cancer?
Yeah, so that's a lovely question. So, currently that's what I really do in my life. I really help people, um, generally people from all walks of life who have been affected, whose sleep has been affected by either something like cancer or who have not been sleeping well for a really long time. So, besides being a mainstream surgeon, I also am an ICF certified life coach. I've also undergone an intensive 6-month training for cancer coaching. And I'm also a Heal Your Life teacher. So Heal Your Life was basically the work of Louise Hay, who was kind of the first metaphysical teacher way back in the 70s. So I've kind of incorporated all of this, and I realized that sleep is really a reflection of how your healing has gone. And so I've incorporated all of this, different aspects of myself, including my own experience through cancer, my own experience through sleeplessness, and my own getting back on the right track of having a good night of sleep. I realized that sleep is really important, because if you haven't slept well, we all know that we don't work properly. We can't function normally. We may not feel like doing any exercise. We may not be in a mood, or we may not have the capacity to cook healthy for ourselves. So really, sleep is really the foundation of health. And that is all talking at a very kind of extrinsic level. Sleep also is a reflection of what's going on in your subconscious mind. So for me, I really think sleep is really a reflection of your actual healing. And so it is all these components that I bring together when I'm working with my clients. Cancer really forces each and every one of us to look into pretty much all the important aspects of our life. And usually when we are awake, doing something, which is the way we keep ourselves busy, we don't have time to think about ourselves much. And it's at nighttime at 3 a.m. when you're waking up, wondering about what happened there, or worried about how your appointment tomorrow is going to go. That's when you need some assistance. And that's pretty much what I do. The other thing is, people tend to be very, very scared, and again, it can affect your sleep, and you're scared about the finances, because as we all know, and it's something which I'm sure your center is very, very aware of is how expensive and how much of a financial burden it can be. So I also help people to help them to know how to get into the right type of resources, how to tap into the right type of organizations that are available out there, because the reality is that some part of the treatment may get covered, but some part of the treatment you still have to go and pay out from your pocket, which many of us may not be able to afford to. And of course, the chances of recurrence, that is something which always stays on in our mind. And obviously, the mind being the way it is, it always loves to reach out to the most negative things that can happen. And once you go down that turmoil, then it just keeps going down. So it's really about how to cope better with those fears of recurrence, your future, the family's future, whatever. So that's how I really work with everybody around sleep. And of course, with the fact that I was an ENT surgeon, I also do look into other components of sleep as well, if the person actually has always been having a sleep problem or anything. So the medical background really helps me to not only go into the psychology of sleep, but really looking into something else that may be affecting their sleep as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when did you think that I can beat this disease, or was this belief always there with you?
Look, I think in a heart of hearts, I don't know if there's anybody who actually felt that they had completely bet the disease. Like, I think that 0.0001% fear is always there, that there may be some cancer cells that are lurking in your body, no matter how good you may be, no matter how much treatment you've had or whatever. I think it's a matter of thinking beyond that and saying, all right, even if I do have the cancer, and even if the cancer does come back, how is it going to change the trajectory of my life? And it's kind of befriending that fear almost and saying, yes, it is cancer. We know that there is a chance that it can come back, but how am I going to let that to affect my current moment, my current day, my current hour? And when we are able to cope with it in that way, I think then that is one of the better ways of knowing or dealing with that. So I don't know if there's anybody who actually has said, yeah, I have bet cancer. It may just be a very kind of an external gratification, but in our heart of hearts, I think each and every one of us do know that there is a small little lurking fear within each of us. But hey, you can't allow the fear to overtake you or paralyze you.
So what do you think are the stigmas attached to cancer and the importance of awareness for it?
As far as stigma is concerned, for me, I really strongly believe that cancer is not necessarily a death sentence. With all the treatments available nowadays and the amount of things that have progressed right now, where research is, it's so amazing. There are more and more options that are there. The stigma around cancer, of course, is that people think like if it runs in the family, then you're more prone of getting cancer. It can be kind of contagious and stuff like that, which is so not true. Yes, there are certain precautions that you need to take when you are around people who are under treatment, but that's all medical information as well. So I think it's really important to be aware of what information you're getting fed with and not just buying everything that's available on the internet. I am strongly not for only alternative treatment, although I do know of quite a few cases where people like to go, and don't want to go for mainstream treatment, but I don't really propagate that. I would rather have something that I know has proven to help me. And when I have the side effects, which eventually we do know happens as a part of cancer and the treatments available, it's about knowing how to cope better with those side effects as well. So I think the stigma around cancer, I think, is where it's like so important, more than anything else, for people to continue having hope, to continue having the faith, and really thinking and believing that somebody else's story doesn't have to be your story.
Yes. So at zenonco.io, we help cancer patients like throughout their journey from diagnosis to forever. So what do you think about our work?
Well, it's something very, very, very new to me. When you reached out, to be honest, I just had a very brief look at the whole thing. I would love to know more about what you people do. And I think as we've discussed before, I would love to be able to see if there's something that we can collaborate and do together. Because I think there is so much of help that people need. We are at a privileged place where we have the right type of information, but cancer doesn't really spare anyone. It's not choosy about whom it's going to affect. And I think it's so important for cancer to reach a stage where people are going to think it can be like, so many years ago, tuberculosis used to be considered to be incurable, right? Like you were going to be dying from TB. There was no choice. But look at how it's just, it's changed. And so it's really about trying to think about cancer also being something that can be curable. And there's so much of research that's going on. And it's really amazing that, there are so many organizations like yours that are trying to do something that's trying to change the stigma, trying to keep people, giving them the hope and the support that everybody needs. Even I needed it at a time when I was going through it. So
Yes.
each and every one of us, no matter what may be our background, no matter what may be our qualifications or our educations, we still need the support as a patient when we are having to walk the journey. And it's also post cancer as well. Post cancer as well, I think this support is so pivotal. You're getting a second lease at life. You have become a changed person. Um, and it's really important for us to know in what direction to head towards. So I think even as a cancer, post your cancer journey as well, it's important to continue having support and to have the right type of people to surround you. As much as your family members and your loved ones and your friends want to help you, I think the bond that a cancer person can actually have with somebody else is something that nobody else can actually provide. And I think that's what really makes the bond that I have with each of my clients really unique. And that has made it so much more different from when I was just a surgeon versus now that I am under a category of a survivor. I think it's just made me a little bit more of a human person.
So, did you join any support group? And what do you think are the importance of such support groups?
So there was just one support group that we had just started over here. So I was one of the founder members because we realized that in New Zealand, there wasn't any breast cancer support group. So, we just started it about around the time when I was diagnosed, and that was pretty much the support group. I tried joining a few other groups, but again, I just realized that they were just draining me a little bit too much. And so that was pretty much me, just having one support group. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the biggest support that I also got was also from my friends. So
Hmm.
that was a different type of a support. Besides that, to be honest, whatever I really needed, I was able to look it up. I did do a fair amount of reading, found some good books, found some good resources, and I made sure that the information I was feeding myself with was something that was going to be evidence based and something which is of value. Yeah.
Yes. So, it is said that art or any creative thing works as healing. So, have you tried any such thing during your journey?
Um, well, I started doing so. I always have been a person who always has liked doing some journaling. I think journaling was something that became a little bit more regular for me. And
Hmm.
one thing that I actually found that I found immensely healing was when I wrote about my own cancer journey. So I've co-authored, it's actually an Amazon bestseller, even a year from production or publication, where I've shared my story of cancer along with 23 other global Indian women.
Hmm.
Not all, none of them are cancer survivors, but each of them from how it's called the Shakti Awakening. So it's really about how each of us have triumphed from our individual challenges. And I found that writing about my cancer was immensely healing. And I think that really has helped me. In terms of creativity, I've just realized, we don't have to be so serious about everything in life anymore. I have become a much lighter person to be with. I allow myself to do some pretty uh, non, non simple stuff. Let's put it that way. Watching some random movies and things like that, which was something I always used to feel before was a waste of time. And in terms of creativity, yeah, as part of what I'm doing for work now, I love doing, the type of posts. I like to do a lot of podcasts. I like to talk about and I like to enlighten people and encourage people about what can be done about this. And that really is my way of continuing to heal.
Hmm.
Um, so I think mainly it would be writing, to be really honest, writing and expressing myself in different ways. I think
Hmm.
that's what has actually kind of really helped.
Yes. So, if you have to sum up your journey in one sentence, then what would that be?
Uh, well, it would just be life starts now.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your valuable time, Dr. Anitha. I hope this session really motivates people out there who have traveled or been traveling through this journey. So it was lovely having you here today with us on this session. So once again, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here, and all the best.